Thank you so much for being here. I'm Dr. Topeka K. Sam here with my brother, Sincere Allah, and we are here to talk about the panel from Bars to Brilliance. Now, our good brother, Shaka Senghor, was supposed to be here, but unfortunately, you know, planes are what planes are. So we decided that we were going to have a fireside chat. So I just want to thank iHeartRadio and Charlamagne for putting together this beautiful day of conference on mental wellness for World Mental Health Day, but also understanding the importance to talk about incarceration, people who've been incarcerated, and justice-impacted people as relates to mental health. And so just by show of hands, how many people in here are justice-impacted? Okay, right, thank you. I heard somebody say all of us. So when we talk about, you know, Black and brown communities specifically, we are disproportionately impacted by mental health and incarceration. Okay, and the numbers show that 1 in 3 adults has an impacted loved one. So that means 1 in 3 of every single person in this room has someone who's experienced incarceration. And between Sincere and I, both of us have experienced incarceration, not just from family and friends, but we both have been incarcerated as well. And so while I have a list of questions, we were just talking in the back about why this conference feels a little different for us. And we're going to dive a little deep into just the impacts of incarceration, how mental health plays a role in that, and how we start off actually having many type of traumas that we experience that lead us into incarceration, through incarceration and post-incarceration. So Sincere, can you just share a little bit about what you're feeling right now?
First of all, Sincere Allah, I did 24 years in prison from the age of 18 to 42. I've only been home for 2 years. And right now, like, this is kind of a surreal...
That's right. Welcome home, brother.
Appreciate it. So, as I was telling Dr. Topeka in the back, this is a surreal feeling for me because I go all around, you know, my state. I'm a state organizer for Reform Alliance in Virginia. But I go around my state as well as the country talking about issues related to criminal justice reform, social justice reform, prison reform, youth justice, all these initiatives. And this would be the first time I'm speaking on a stage about mental health as it relates to the trauma individuals go through, not only the person that's incarcerated, but our family members, our loved ones that also go through and experience trauma of your incarceration as well.
And when we think about that trauma, right, and most of the work that I do is centered around women and girls. And so as Sincere said, that he works as a state organizer for reform. I am the founder and CEO of the Ladies of Hope Ministries, and our epic vision is to end poverty and incarceration of women and girls globally. I'm also the co-founder of a fintech company called MyFresh. And I work with a host of other organizations, Unconditional Freedom, Reform Alliance on storytelling, and many, many others. And so women specifically, 60% of women actually experience mental health issues more than men, Black women specifically. And also, when you think about mental health aligned with physical health and wellness, sexual health, meaning domestic violence, intimate partner violence, women experience that who have been incarcerated, 95% are reported. And so we don't talk about the things that women have experienced going into prison, and then once we're in prison, all of the other things that we experience while we're there. More trauma, some sexual abuse, and then we get out. You know, even when we're being strip searched or touched in inappropriate ways, and we've experienced sexual trauma ourselves, then to come home, and we talked about over 40,000 barriers to people who are coming back from prison or jail, have to then unpack all the trauma that they've been through to now getting home and having to try to navigate a system. And in Sincere's case, 25 years later, I did 3 years in federal prison. And to have to navigate through all of these barriers while trying to heal yourself is almost impossible, right? And so, you know, the topic of Bars to Brilliance, can you talk about how you move from being incarcerated, right, and getting home in 2 years, which is incredible that you're actually sitting on this stage right now. Yeah, that definitely needs to be elevated. But to talk about what you've been able to do to get even employed, right, with Reform Alliance, who is another partner within this work in this space, but a lot of the boards and things that you sit on, and why you think it's important to connect with the youth and other people in the community.
All right, so 46,000 collateral consequences for an individual who has a conviction on their record. And even stands if you don't have a conviction, but sometimes just an arrest if you're in a state that doesn't have expungements. So it's a difficult task for an individual to serve time, to be stripped out of your social and your socioeconomical circle, put into another society that teaches you the one that you just left, you're irredeemable. They don't want you. Even when you get out, we're gonna make sure that you feel that pain by saying anything related to housing, employment, education, you're now not allowed or not given the same grace that others who have not gone through that incarceration or have a record or have a charge on their record or an arrest on their record go through. So getting a job for me was extremely difficult. I'm originally from Boston, and I was living in Virginia when I was released. So I got released not just because I finished my time, but the rarest form of release for an individual that's incarcerated is a pardon. So I received a pardon in 2022 from the former governor. That's how I got out. And upon, like, so when you receive a pardon, if anybody knows, when you receive a pardon or clemency, you're let out that day. Like, somebody comes in with a piece of paper and says, all right, you're free to go, get out. So I was put out, no ID, I didn't even have an address in Virginia to use, and because I was in a state facility, you don't automatically go to halfway houses like you do in the federal system. So literally I had to call around to some friends and say, you know, can somebody give me an address that I can use for because I can't get out without an address. And like, these are things that the system didn't think about because, all right, little back history, I was 18 years old, initially facing a death penalty. And so in order to save my life, I took what's called an Alford plea. And it was a 55-year plea. So I still have 30 years over my head, around about 30 years over my head, if I commit a violation of a policy. So, for example, a technical violation could land me back in prison. If I miss a meeting with my PO right now, if I miss a meeting with my my parole officer, which I don't physically have a parole officer right now, I'm on what's called shadow track. Where I don't necessarily have to check in with a physical person. I just check in on an app. So having to like process this, I'm being released. I never thought I was getting out of prison, first of all. Never thought I was going home. Virginia, there's no parole. It's 85% of your time. So a 50-year sentence at 18 years old, I would have been in my 70s. So there's no, like, I'm not processing as a child, as an adolescent, and even into my early adulthood, that I'm going home at some point. So for me to receive that pardon, I worked for it. Yeah, I put in a lot of work for it, but for me to get that and be released in just a matter of moments, it's a hard hit. And also to not have any resources to go home to. There's no job waiting for me, there's no car, there's no auntie, uncle, no family in Virginia. So finding a way to use the resources that I was able to acquire while I was incarcerated was my saving grace. I was fortunate enough to be in a position to have a lot of people that had a lot of love for me show me that they got me. So, please.
There was a lot of people that you met inside too, right? Like you had a community when you came home.
Every one of those individuals, like some were staff members of prisons, a former assistant warden. Like all of these people were like, yo, we watched you grow in there, and they helped. Someone, gave me a car. I was like, yo, you can use this car until you get your own. You need a place to stay, got that too. You need a job, we'll help you with that as well. So all those things were as a result of the work that I put in on myself and built my own human capital and the relationships that I was able to keep while incarcerated. which a lot of people aren't able to do. So yeah, it was a hard, arduous kind of task and process, especially the reality hit that I was putting in applications and I was getting shot down for housing and employment soon as they go through the background check, even though my case happened over almost a quarter of a century ago. So it was weird to me. It was like they were treating me like it just happened yesterday.
Yeah.
And these things are lifelong. I will forever have this F on my report card, as we like to say. Forever have that. And that's the only thing. As you know, you could bring home a report card when you was little. You bring home a report card with 3 A's, 2 B's, and 1 F. Mom and pops, whoever, grandma, whoever, they're going to focus on that F. And that's what society does. They disregard the A's and B's and focus on that F.
No, that's good because, you know, when you think about that, the fact I received a pardon also from the president because I was federal, and thank you. But it's the same, right? No matter what, it never goes away. And so you're looking for, instead of me wanting to look for an employment, I decided to create an organization and create businesses that would employ people who had convictions, right? And there's so many people, it's like every single chair in here is filled. There's something that each of you all can do for someone who is impacted by the justice system. I mean, I saw the show of hands earlier. You can even just reach into your loved one who's there, your friend who is there, because we talked about in the back, like sometimes these prisons and jails are locked down for months at a time. No calls on the outside. They stop mail from coming in. No visits, no nothing. And so to hear from someone from the outside, just to say, I'm thinking of you, I want to know how you're doing, when you have to think, for those of you who have pets, how many people have pets? You let them out, right? Frequently throughout the day. You make sure that they're outside, they're walking around, they have fresh air, they're drinking, they're eating. People incarcerated don't even get that. And so it's so important that we're taking care of our community who's also inside of prisons, but also when people come out, that we're also providing those opportunities. And it's critical to understand that while we think that we have it all together when we come out, we don't. You know, you need a good support system, you need family, you need friends, and you need mental health support. You know, you shared behind, I shared first that when I came home, I did therapy every single week for a year straight. While I did therapy before I went in, so I was already familiar with how it was important to take care of your mental health. But when I came home, I saw a therapist every single week. And it was critical that I did that because, one, I knew that I wanted to work in supporting women and girls who experienced what I did. And I could not lead in my own trauma. That I had to begin the work in healing myself in order to help to heal other people. And that was 3 years, right? Thank you. But when I talked to my brother here, and he's done 25 years, and he's been out now 2 years, and you haven't seen a mental health professional yet. And can you share why? Because we talked about that, and it was a really great insight as into why, but share specifically some of the things that you said that I think some of the people need to hear.
So while you're incarcerated, they have what's called an annual review. And when they do your annual review, a part of it is your mental health evaluation. However, if you want to go to a lower level, if you're one of these individuals, so they abolished parole in Virginia in 1995. So as a result of that, a lot of the individuals that were still incarcerated under the old law, as we call it, they didn't want to be tagged with some sort of mental health disorder or some sort of anything dealing with mental health, because when you go for parole, they say, okay, is this person fit for society? Who wants to give someone their freedom when they are suffering from PTSD, from schizophrenia, from all these things that the funny thing is they incarcerate? So individuals who have mental health, who deal with mental health diagnosis, they are incarcerated as a result of their mental health diagnosis. I've seen a lot of times individuals come in, they close down the only mental health facility they had in Virginia and send them all into prison. About 15 years ago, they sent them all into the major institutions. And what we saw was the system wasn't ready to respond to that. So 6 of us got together and decided that we were going to start still right now, the only therapeutic community for mental health and substance use disorder in the Department of Corrections in Virginia. And peace. So thinking about that, and then you hear some of the issues that these individuals went through when they were on the street. Like, how is he here? Like, we would question ourselves. Like, you can see he's clearly in need of help and assistance. He went into a store. You know, one individual went into a store, and the clerk thought that he was going to rob him. Calls the police, gets into an altercation with the police. They give him assault and assault on the officer. But he was in a manic state, and then they exacerbated it by coming in so aggressive and not understanding, or they're not trained to understand that when you're dealing with someone in that state, that you need a professional there. You don't need a police officer there. So, peace. So, same thing when incarcerated. The Department of Corrections didn't train its staff to deal with that kind of influx of individuals who suffer from those kind of mental health diagnoses. So, and neither were we. However, in knowing the people of this environment better than they know the people of that environment, we were able to successfully build a program that they now use all over the state. So, like, for me, thank you. For me, it's wonderful to come out and to continue that work. I can sit on the board of a lot of youth organizations and a lot of mental organizations that deal with individuals, that do direct service work for individuals who suffer from substance use disorders and mental health. And it's as a result of what I saw was a need inside, but an ounce of prevention beats a pound of cure. We know the system isn't a cure. So what I do is, with my lived experience, is I try to do preventative work in the communities. Peace.
Thank you. And I know that, you know, the system we talked about is not designed to heal people. It's designed to harm people. That there's nothing about a prison that is good. Some people ask, you know, what was the best prison you was in? None. You know, there's not one prison that is the best prison that you can ever go to. And I had mentioned the work that I do with Unconditional Freedom is thinking about prison monasteries and, like, how are you changing these into holistic communities of healing? And I've had the great privilege of going to Norway and Germany and other places around the country where I've actually walked in and saw, I believe it was in Norway, where the cell was better than my college dorm room.
Thanks.
And I just couldn't believe it. I broke down and cried because I was like, wow. And people came in and they had their regular clothes, street clothes on, and they were cooking. They had a key to get into their room, not their cell. They had windows so they can see outside. And these are things that we know are not happening within this country. And so we have to think more about not only the community of Brilliance, because you hear my brother here, Brilliance, that is behind these bars that are in our country today. And while we are all fighting, you know, every single day to change laws, to make sure that we're getting people out, but when people are out, people need support, right? We need housing. We need health care. We need jobs. We need opportunity. We need family. We need healthy community. And we don't need people to shut our door because of where we've been. Because I'm sure if either one of us walked past you, you wouldn't have known that we were both incarcerated, would you? Right? So there's a lot of us out here in these streets. So, you know, I want us to be just really mindful that while there's no trauma that is bigger than the next, everyone's trauma is trauma. You know, I tell people, for sure. I tell people all the time, you know, one of my friends used to joke me and say, Topeka, she did 10 years in prison. And she was like, Topeka, you only did a weekend because you did 3 years. And I'm like, a weekend? Are you kidding me? That was the longest weekend I ever do. But on top of that, it's the fact that you can, like, we're not going to trauma check, right? Your trauma is no heavier than mine. So I think that we all need to make sure that we are thinking about the things that we have been through, understanding within our community when we see someone who is struggling, we don't laugh, we don't push them away, we see how we can help and support them. There are mental health providers and other ways that we can call first responders instead of the police so people aren't killed or they're not thrown in prison, but they're getting the support that they need, because not only in Virginia and New York City we don't have mental health hospitals or places anymore like we used to. So we need to respond as a community and people, and we need to help to support our people. And so we're out of time, but thank you, Sincere Allah, so much for joining the conversation with me. Thank you all for being here and for just, being open and listening to the impacts that incarceration has on our community. Thank you.